Hello, everyone. My name is
Hola a
James
todos,
Williams,
yo soy
and
Williams,
today
James
I'm
Williams,
going
y
to be
hoy
talking about how high
voy a
school booster clubs can be utilized to facilitate
presentar
community
sobre cómo,
involvement. So,
cómo facilitar
one
el
issue that
involucramiento
often
en la comunidad.
affects a lot of people with disabilities
Mm,
is that when they age out of education, whether it's when they finish high school, whether it's when they age out of transition services, usually at age 21 or 22, they often find themselves in a place where they don't always have services or benefits or a place in their communities where they can have a sense of identity and a sense of belonging. And this aging out occurs with virtually everyone with a disability. And oftentimes, when they lose their right to an education, although some people with disabilities may pursue higher education, not everybody does. And even when they do, the benefits they're entitled to in higher education are different than those in special education. However, as much as we might want people with disabilities to accomplish their goals and go as far as they can, the reality is that people with disabilities do have limitations. There are some things that not every person with a disability is going to be able to do. And the reality is that there will be and always will be a population of people with disabilities who are not going to be able to pursue higher education, whom, after they age out of education, will very likely remain in their parents' homes, in their hometowns, in their home communities for quite some time after finishing high school. Some people call that aging out as falling off a cliff. And for some people with disabilities, that is very much the case. We need to accept this reality. And instead of shaming these people, we need to find a way to accept them in our communities. If a person with a disability is going to remain in their home community, remain at home with their parents for as long as that may be, places need to be built for those individuals. And today I'm going to be talking about a place that may exist in many communities for those individuals, the local high school booster club. So, what is a high school booster club? Not all high schools have these clubs, but a high school booster club is a club that some high schools have, which is not for students. It is mostly for usually parents and community members that helps support or boost athletics at the high school. Most high school booster clubs are comprised of parents of the student athletes at the high school who typically remain members for as long as their students are in the high school. However, some booster clubs, like the booster club I am a part of, are open to community members. Booster clubs often help sell concessions at athletic events within the high school and help raise funds for the high school. They may also be involved in designing spiritware for the high school. Now, in 2010, I finished high school with a modified diploma from Glenbrook North High School in Northbrook, Illinois. Glenbrook North High School is actually a known high school nationwide because it was actually the setting for the very famous movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off back in the 1980s. Glenbrook North High School was the high school Ferris Bueller attended and was actually the high school that director John Hughes, the creator of many well-known movies like 16 Candles, Pretty in Pink, The Breakfast Club, that was his high school. And those movies were based on Glenbrook North High School. Indeed, Shermer High School, the high school that many of John Hughes's films were set in, actually was named because Glenbrook North High School is located on a street called Shermer Road. When I finished high school, like many other adults with disabilities, I have autism. I aged out of special education right before my 22nd birthday with a modified diploma. Fortunately, I had already built a career as a self-advocate and started traveling shortly after graduation to speaking engagements to talk about various issues related to autism and other disabilities. However, my life was forever changed when I was invited by my former high school, Glenbrook North High School, to join their booster club. I had already been a strong supporter of Glenbrook North athletics as a student and even after graduation. I became a supporter of Glenbrook North athletics because while I was a student at Glenbrook North, I was often made fun of by many kids due to autistic tendencies, but discovered that when I spectated at athletic events, I was safe. Kids didn't cause me trouble when I spectated, and I soon became respected among the athletes at Glenbrook North for my support at their athletic events. After graduation, I had an epiphany. I may have aged out of education, and I may have aged out of being a student, but there technically was no rule saying that I couldn't stop attending athletic events. Yeah, there may be an unwritten rule that unless it's a football game or a boys' basketball game, it's usually only parents and family members of the athletes that attend the games, but there was no law saying I couldn't stop going to Glenbrook North athletics or any school athletics. Technically, they were public events that anyone could go to, despite unwritten rules saying I couldn't. So I made a decision. Even after graduation, I continued to spectate at various athletics whenever my schedule permitted. And then 5 years later, the Booster Club, having noticed my loyal support for athletics at Glenbrook North High School, said, "How would you like to join the Booster Club, help with concessions, and be a part of supporting Glenbrook North athletics officially?" This happened in the spring of 2015, almost 5 years after I graduated. I thought it over and made a decision. I decided to join the Booster Club at Glenbrook North, but delayed my membership until the fall of 2015, which would enable me to start fresh at the beginning of a new school year and learn about the Booster Club. Well, my boostering life was born in the fall of 2015. I met a group of amazing parents and other community members and other graduates of Glenbrook North. Together, they helped me enter the club, helped me feel welcome into the club, wherein I suddenly now had a whole new life, volunteering at my high school, selling concessions, helping raise funds for the athletic events, and even helping out at the Booster Club's annual fundraiser. Indeed, it was attending the fundraiser in the spring of 2015 that I was recruited into the Booster Club in the first place. My membership in the Booster Club at Glenbrook North High School gave me a place in my community. Because although I did pursue a career and still do as a traveling self-advocate, I was never able to live independently. I was unable to pursue higher education because of the modifications of my diploma. I still live at home with my parents despite my traveling schedule. And I still rely on them for support as an autistic adult. I needed a place in my home community where I would be accepted as an adult with a disability. And one of those places was my old high school's booster club. The high school welcomed me back with open arms. They never told me I couldn't support their athletics. They said, yes, you've aged out of education, but you are welcome as a spectator. I am now well known in my community and well respected as a booster club member. I came to this conference today to share this story in the hopes that high schools nationwide can be encouraged if they have booster clubs, if they have athletic teams, active athletic teams. I mean, most high schools have athletic teams, to encourage high schools to encourage their graduates with disabilities, if they choose to, if they're going to remain at home, to return as spectators, to be allowed and accepted as spectators, because in the end, you may age out of education, but there's no rule saying you ever age out of being an athletic spectator. Whole communities go to high school football games and basketball games. What's there to say that people can't go see cross-country meets or swim meets or volleyball games or anything else happening? The high school has respected my time in the booster club. Because in the end, every person with a disability has some limitations. We all have different abilities. Some of us are going to be able to do things that other people with disabilities will never do. That doesn't mean that we still can't live meaningful lives. That doesn't mean that we should belittle people with disabilities who can't do something that we might be able to do. I can travel independently. I know other people with disabilities who can't, but I can't live independently. And I know other people with disabilities who can. The Booster Club was a way that I was able to become an active member in my community, a community I've lived in ever since I was 4 years old. So with that, I am going to open the floor to anyone who has any questions they might have about boostering and high school booster clubs. Feel free to message on chat and share what you want to share. Do we have any questions? Sam H says, does your booster club hold regular meetings along with events? Yes, they do. And in fact, they have different types of meetings. Some of the meetings are closed and only open to the board members. Others are open to any booster club member. I'm not on the board of Glenbrook North's Booster Club. I am just one of their active volunteers and spend a lot of time when I am not doing my other work volunteering. At those meetings, I attend whenever I can. And it is at those meetings where I often plan my schedule with other members and the board regarding what events I will be participating in. So what are some of the activities being done in the booster events? Trisha Lazar says, so usually the booster club primarily serves as concession sellers at the various sports. At Glenbrook North, concessions are sold in volleyball, soccer, football, swimming and diving in the fall, basketball in the wintertime, along with wrestling, and in the spring, soccer, baseball, water polo, and lacrosse. The Booster Club also holds an annual fundraiser, which is distinct to the Booster Club. And also, the Booster Club will often have tables at various school events related to the beginning of the school year. So like at the beginning of the school year registration, the Booster Club will have a membership tent. During my high school has an annual 8th grade activity night where 8th graders get to learn about the activities offered at Glenbrook North, and the Booster Club will have a table where they sell spirit wear to students and talk to parents about the Booster Club. Yes, we did have a lot of changes with COVID. A lot of our in-person athletic events were canceled. And then when our athletic events began as things reopened, oftentimes the Booster Club was not allowed to sell concessions at first, but we were allowed to sell spirit wear. So a lot of the concessions helpers became temporary spirit wear helpers, where we would sell school spirit wear at those events. Now, when the Booster Club, during the initial part of the pandemic, there were no athletic events at all. The club ended all of their all Booster Club meetings for everyone and strictly had the board meet for a while to figure out, how are we going to continue as an organization. However, the club did not die with the pandemic, and people who worked for the board were in communication with me during the entire pandemic to let me know what the new protocols were so I could continue the volunteer work that they had valued for many years from me as a Booster Club member. This year marks my 6th year as a member of the Glenbrook North Booster Club. Any other questions? So the Booster Club primarily was funded by membership fees, though in the last several years, the Booster Club has actually comped my membership because of the extensive volunteering that I have done for them in the past years. The primary fundraiser that the Booster Club does every year is the Booster Bash. And the Booster Bash is basically this big gala where there's an admission fee and people come and have a nice dinner, and there's a silent auction, a nice dinner, and a large amount of the Booster Club's funding comes from that Booster Bash. The primary sources of funding the Booster Club has are membership fees and the Booster Bash. And then that money is given to various teams based on things they need. A team will say to the Booster Club, we need this or we need that. And then the Booster Club will decide as a club if they approve those requests. 2 things the Booster Club helped fund were a replacement scoreboard in the Glenbrook North High School gym, which was built actually during the pandemic when the school was closed and they could build the scoreboard. And the Booster Club also funded a replacement of the turf in the football field from a natural turf to an artificial turf as well. Next question. One of the nice things about being a member of the Booster Club is that when I showcased extensive skill following the various duties that I followed, especially as a concession seller, and then also selling raffle tickets during the Booster Bash for their benefit raffle, alongside their silent auction and their actual auction of various events, is that people were willing to overlook my autism because they saw that I was skilled with the duties that being a Booster Club member entailed. I was not James Williams, the crazy autistic adult. I was James Williams, the dedicated Booster Club volunteer. And one reality I've had to face is that, people sadly are a little less tolerant of people with disabilities in work settings where there's money involved versus settings where people are volunteering and aren't getting paid. And indeed, I am on disability benefits. I'm also supported in part by my parents as well. And what I've learned is that even though I struggled in many workplace settings because many employers don't often see my abilities as worth the pay they're supposed to give me, I can still have a meaningful life and be a contributing member of society as a volunteer at my high school, as a self-advocate, while being supported by my parents and having disability benefits. Being on benefits doesn't mean you have to be lazy. And I know many people on benefits who struggled in workplaces because of judgment and disability intolerance, who then became amazing volunteers in their communities at the same time. So we have time now for one more question, and then the session, our time will be up. Does anyone have any more questions? Well, in that case, thank you all for coming to my session about booster clubs and how high school booster clubs can be utilized for community involvement. As you can see, I'm actually wearing an official mask from my high school with my school colors and part of my spirit wear. The Glenbrook North Spartans, our mascot is the Spartan. And I'm going to close with the motto of my high school's booster club: be positive, be proud, be a Spartan. Have a great day, everybody.